Talk. This is a show where we discuss the week in Humboldt, the local issues, and the local personalities. I'm your local host, Talvi Freed, and I'll be here with you for the next hour. Tonight, we're going to be talking trash. Not that kind of trash talking, though. What are the challenges of solid waste management in Humboldt County? What happened to our local recycling center? What challenges do we face with the new organic waste regulations? How are the county and cities handling waste disposal issues, such as litter, abandoned vehicles, lots of tents? Our guests tonight are Zero Waste Humboldt's president, Krista Miller, Keller-Heckman, director of operations for Humboldt Waste Management Authority, and Praszker, environmental project manager from the city of Eureka and member of the Solid Waste Management Task Force. Welcome, everyone. You can say hi.
Hello.
Thank you.
Of course. So there's a lot going on in the trash world. I'm not sure who to ask this question to, though it's the one question that I'm like, where's the recycling? What do we do? What's going on with that? Are there any plans to bring back the Eureka Recycling Center? Is there anywhere in Humboldt that people could take recycling right now?
Yeah, so I can probably take that for you. So again, obviously my name is Eric Keller. I'm the Director of Operations for Humboldt Waste Management Authority. And as you alluded to, we used to operate the Eureka Recycling Center down on Hawthorne Street in Eureka. Obviously, we closed that a couple of years ago due to the original closure was because of some COVID-related issues. And then it has maintained its closure because of a shift of needs from our jurisdictions and the SB 1383 food waste and organic waste bill that's popped up recently. So currently right now in Humboldt County, there are several places to still take your recycling. HWMA will still take it in the mixed or single stream fashion. So that means that material that really you would normally put in your blue can that you mix together, glass, plastic, paper, cans, that can all come down to the transfer station still. There is a fee for that, and that fee is passed directly from our processor onto the resident or the self-hauler. So that fee goes directly to sorting out that material and ensuring that it still gets recycled. For some of the harder to recycle items, such as e-waste, fridges, things like that, Humboldt Sanitation in McKinleyville, California, and Eel River Recology in Fortuna, California, they are still accepting those types of materials. But unfortunately, right now, HWMA is not.
Yeah, and I'll tag on to that recycling is happening. I know there's a lot of misinformation about recycling, especially because there's state and national information that goes out about recycling issues, but recycling is a local program that's controlled locally. So Eureka has a mandatory curbside service, which is going to become pretty common throughout the state with SB 1383. But we've had mandatory curbside service for quite a while now, which includes recycling. So every Eureka resident should have a blue recycling tote at home that gets picked up once a week that takes mixed recycling. So from the Eureka perspective, access to recycling is still abundant. And then with other cities going mandatory in the coming months too, we'll see more access to recycling at the curbside as well. So just wanted to emphasize that.
Yeah, and just to add on to the recycling of buyback goods, you can take to Hambro in Arcata on South G Street.
And I do want to have a little info session for a moment about recycling, because I feel like I have to explain this whenever I have guests from out of state come in. So I don't know who best would know this, perhaps Krista. I just feel like you'd be very knowledgeable of this. What can go in that recycling bin and what shouldn't? And should you clean your recycling before you put it in there? Like, do you have to?
Yes, please clean it. That's a big one. I think Eric actually can speak to this better because it's a moving target, it seems to me. You know, even though I've been in this for a while, I still am confused, especially about plastics.
Yeah.
Yeah. So she's right. It is always, unfortunately, a moving target, but I will piggyback on, yes, you absolutely want to clean things that you put into the recycling container. So there's a thing like that's called goodwill recycling, where you think or you hope something is able to be recycled, so you throw it in the can anyway. We want to try and get away from that. That causes costs to rise because we still have to pull that material out. Just because you want something to be recyclable doesn't mean that it is. A misnomer is that triangle on the bottom of a lot of plastics. People think that that means that it's recyclable, and that's not what it means. That's telling you the plastic that material is made from. So that's, as an industry, we have not done a very good job of informing customers of stuff like that. It makes it difficult to recycle items when there's not a broad or a general terminology for a lot of items. The second thing is peanut butter jars is a perfect example. If you take a peanut butter jar and you don't clean that material out and you throw it in your can, not only is that not recyclable anymore because of the contamination, the peanut butter that's left over, but when it goes to the facility that processes or sorts material, that now can contaminate a bunch of other material. So say you put your newspaper in your daily newspaper, you put it in your recycling can with your peanut butter jar that's unwashed. Not only have you contaminated the plastic that the peanut butter jar was made out of, but now you've potentially contaminated all of the newspaper that you put in there as well. So you've taken two items that should have been able to have been recycled, and because of that contamination, you can no longer recycle any of it, and that's what we call residual. Which ends up just being trash and goes to the landfill. As far as what items can go in your container, unfortunately, that really changes based on the region you're in. Humboldt County and the jurisdictions, we've really been trying to house our recycling under one banner. And as of right now, all of HWMA's member agencies, so outside of the city of Fortuna and Trinidad, those are housed under one contract for processing this material. So in general, if you live in a jurisdiction that's a member of the authority, your recycling is kind of the same no matter where you move. But industry-wide, from if you go to Portland, their recycling programs are going to be different than what we have here. So you really want to make sure that if you have questions, you want to ask your franchise provider. So your franchise provider is the one that puts your can at your doorstep. You want to make sure and talk to them, reach out to them. What can I put in here? Film plastic, so the stretchy plastic, is almost never recyclable. There are certain types of rigid plastics, so the stuff that kind of is made out of like swing sets or Rubbermaid totes, stuff like that. The size dependent can also make it not recyclable. So you want to really make sure that you want to check with either your local provider. You can always call HWMA. We'd be more than happy to provide info on what can and can't go in there. But the best place to check is always the individual providing you the service.
Yeah, and then I would add on with curbside recology service, which is the common franchise hauler around here. It's really containers. So glass containers, thick plastic containers. Recology likes to say that if you can crumple the plastic in your hand, that's not a recyclable plastic. So think about like a strawberry clamshell that's a very thin plastic. That's one you would not recycle. Something thick, like a laundry detergent jug, that's a good example of a recyclable plastic. And then almost all paper and cardboard, you just want to look out for cardboard that is waxed, which is typical with the produce cardboard that you might take from the cardboard box pile at Co-op or ENF. And almost all paper, really, unless we're talking wrapping paper that's like got that fancy Christmas gloss to it, most paper is recyclable. So anything else is going to be a no. Recology will find pots and pans, they'll find hoses, they'll find hangers. So anything that was not a container or was a paper product is likely going to be a no, would be the rule of thumb I'd advise.
So for all the material that isn't recyclable, and even with recycling, I'm really curious where it goes, because I did a little bit of research and tried to figure out the history of landfills in Humboldt County. There used to be 2 in Humboldt County. Now we send waste to Medford, Oregon, or Willits, if that's correct. Though and we also used to send a massive amount of recycling to China, who would buy it from us. Then they stopped, supposedly. Then they stopped because our recycling was too dirty, is what I read. And I don't know if that's actually the truth. It's just what I'm reading out there, and there's not much information on it. So I'm not sure if anybody can give me the modern day, like, where does the trash go? And is the recycling center isn't like a full stop, like the items don't go there and get turned into something new there. It's kind of just a filter system, correct? And then it's sent somewhere else. So where does it go?
Yeah, so in general, the flow of either trash or recycling is the resident deems it to either be a waste or recyclable material. They're done with that item. They put it in their can. The franchise hauler, which is the trucks that come and pick it up, they pick it up and they bring it generally to what's called a transfer station or a processor. So that's what HWMA's role is in general. For solid waste, we are a transfer station. For recycling, at that time, we used to be a processor. Now the processor is Recology out at Samoa, generally for most individuals in the county. What those facilities do is they do exactly what it says. They transfer. So in solid waste terms, we take the material, we collect it, we make sure materials that aren't supposed to be in there, such as hazardous waste. We do diversion activities. We pull out wood, plastic, glass, scrap metal, things of that nature, things that can be reclaimed or recycled. And then we transfer that solid waste material into a trailer. That trailer is then tarped, weighed, and it goes all the way up to Medford, Oregon for landfill disposal. For recycling, I can speak a little bit to what HWMA used to do. I can't speak to everything that Recology does, but we used to do the best we could to keep recycling or divertible materials in domestic markets. So a lot of our paper, our cardboard used to go to Springfield, Pacific Paper, Springfield, Oregon. A lot of it used to go to Metro Metals up in Portland, Oregon as well, and Vancouver, Washington. But the majority of glass, plastics, all of those were overseas. There's not a large domestic market for those types of materials. And I would imagine Recology probably does something very similar. They have a little bit more, they're a bigger fish in a bigger pond than HWMA was as far as the commodity markets are concerned. But in general, that's where those markets were. And so the China reference that you made, it was called National Sword. And they reduced the residual rate that was allowable to be sent into their country. So our recycling was too dirty to meet that residual rate anymore with the processes that we had in place.
And I can speak to the Recology end of things. I'm very familiar with their materials recovery facility in Samoa. And just a quick plug, they do offer tours. Anybody can call them up and schedule a tour. They'd be happy to open the facility to you. But the recycling trucks will pick up the blue tote from your house. They'll drive over to the Samoa facility. They dump the truckload. It goes up on a conveyor belt. And from there, people hand pick trash off of a very quick moving belt. If you were to see them in action, you would be quite amazed by how much they get done. And then from there, the different machineries are able to pull out different materials and sort them into different locations. And then they'll even actually resort what's at the end if they didn't get all the contamination out and rerun it again. And from there, they will bale the different materials to go to market. I do know that the glass is sold and processed in California, with the rest of the materials likely going overseas. And again, reiterating that the standards are a lot higher now for the quality of that material, which does raise the cost of processing. So one thing I do want to emphasize is that recycling is not free. I think that that's been a misnomer in our community and our culture, that it's a value, I should be able to get rid of it for free, and to pay for it is absurd. And unfortunately, there's a high cost of that process. And what we're getting on the commodity market is not covering that processing cost. So we should be responsible for our waste. There is a cost associated with it, even if it's getting made into new products.
Does the redemption value not go back to recycling projects? Because that's why we pay that tax. Like, everybody pays that tax specifically to fund recycling and waste projects in California. At least I'm pretty sure that's what it is, right?
So I'll definitely
Go ahead, Roman.
I'll definitely invite Eric to talk about the cost of CRV redemption, but I will just emphasize that CRV is only for specific containers. There's lots of other materials that do not have a CRV tax that are still recyclable. So that's another cultural challenge, is folks will think if there's no CRV redemption, it's not worth recycling or isn't recyclable. And soup cans are a great example. There's no CRV on a soup can, it's still recyclable. But the cost of CRV redemption, I'll pass to Eric because he knows that well.
Yeah, so the thing I want to make sure that we clear up is it is not a tax. So CRV is not a tax. CRV is a deposit. So the very, very beginning of what CRV was an incentive for individuals to recycle. So CRV was founded before really recycling was a thing. It was a project or a pilot project that was originated to try and incentivize the recycling of certain bottles and cans. Mainly it was beverage, small types of juice under a certain percentage of fruit juice, certain types of things, beer, wine under a certain alcohol percentage, stuff like that. But it is simply a redemption value. So it is a deposit. So you pay 5 cents at the store, you are given that 5 cents back. That 5 cents does not go to any type of cost cutting for the handling, the processing, anything. Now, obviously, there are bottles and cans that are paid on that aren't redeemed. So that goes into the cans. That money is funneled into what's called city-county payment programs. It used to be called the bottles and cans bill. That money is used specifically, and it's given back to jurisdictions to incentivize or come up with programs to continue to up the redemption or recycling value of bottles and cans. And it's all meant to incentivize people to bring that material back. That money does not go to processors like what HWMA was or what Hambro does. That money does not go to offsetting handling or processing costs of that material. That's a separate bucket of money that gets touched into. But the CRV you pay is not a tax. It is a deposit. Although, unfortunately, in rural areas, sometimes it can feel like a tax because you're paying it and you don't have a lot of convenient options to get your money back.
Yeah, I was curious, during the pandemic, there were statements made, and I don't know who made them, that every single store is going to start being sued because they're not accepting CRV buybacks. And or that there was no CRV buyback in Humboldt during the pandemic. And I'm not sure exactly how anybody could blame a store that doesn't have the capabilities of that. So there's a question here and I'm not sure how to form it.
So the founding of CRV and the founding of the California Redemption Value was to establish convenient locations for people to redeem their bottles. So they have what's called a convenience zone. So convenience zones are normally situated around stores that sell CRV containers. And I believe it's a half mile. So in a half mile radius is called a convenience zone. And it's around certain stores that meet a threshold. Normally it's a square footage or a total revenue. They have different requirements for different levels. But if you sell CRV and you meet this requirement, you have what's called a convenience zone. And it originally was supposed to be your zone that you service for CRV. So individuals down the street would come to your store, they would buy a can of soda, they'd take it home, they'd drink it, the next time they came to the store, they would redeem it while they were there. That was the intent in the original heart of CRV and these convenience zones. What happened was recycling became profitable. And that meant that businesses wanted to start taking over these responsibilities.
Okay, we are going to take our first break and be right back. We're talking trash on Thursday Night Talks. Welcome back, everyone, and welcome to Trash Talkin' on Thursday Night Talks. We're not talking that sort of trash talk, though. We're not being mean like that. Instead, we're discussing everything you wanted to know about solid waste disposal in Humboldt County. I would like to get into organic waste in a moment, just because of the new SB 1383 bill and it's what effects it will have in the county, and especially Arcata seems to be heavily participating in this or wanting to participate in this. Though if you are listening right now and feel like calling in, we are taking your Zoom calls at 669-900-6833. Again, that's 669-900-6833. You're going to need the meeting ID number to join. It's 511-886-8501. Again, that's 511-886-8501. And I am joined by Krista Miller, Eric Keller-Heckman, and Robin Praszker. And let's get into the organic waste models, which I feel, Krista, you might. So I love zero waste Humboldt, though I know a lot of listeners are like, what is zero waste Humboldt? Is that not just part of the Humboldt Waste Management Authority? And it's not, it's its own identity.
Yes.
So can you let everyone know what that is?
Sure. Zero Waste Humboldt is a nonprofit organization, and we advocate for the zero waste philosophy. So obviously there's always going to be waste in our current day and future. However, it's kind of a reminder to try and think about your consumption habits. And then we also, as an organization, do work with city governments and local schools and education. We've done a lot of things over the past, and we are continuing to do quite a bit for a volunteer crew. Yeah, there's a lot to talk about.
There really is. I mean, it almost kind of feels like another group that isn't just, it's not just awareness. It almost feels like Zero Waste Humboldt is also, it deals with the legalese for cities of waste, which there's a lot of legalese flying around. Speaking of SB 1383, which an article was just released earlier, I think today actually, in the Outpost about what's going on in Arcata and how they've decided to create a compost cycle with Humboldt Waste Management Authority, or that it's in talks. I skimmed the article, it only came out today, so I was like, oh, we got to fit this in. And that's a curiosity to me, because I don't feel like there's the green bin that most houses have. Not every house seems to have that. Like the recycling bin is mandatory. I'm not sure the green bin is. And do we put compost in there now? I'm really confused, because I figured that's just for like leaf cuttings, or, you know, the rose bushes got trimmed down, put them in there. So this is not my specialty. So, well, I live in Eureka, so maybe Robin, do you know how the city's working? Because I know I read the article about Arcata, that was the city of Eureka working to help with this supposed necessary and mandatory transition to, which for those not aware, SB 1383 is it's an ordinance, a statewide ordinance where the goal is to reduce organic waste disposal by 75% by 2025 and to recover 20% of edible food currently being thrown away to help the quarter of Californians suffering from food scarcity, which that's a lot. That's a big, lofty goal, considering that it took us from the 70s to get to this point now.
Yeah, I'll take it a few steps back and give a bigger picture because it's not just Arcata. So SB 1383 passed through the state legislature and it set these goals. And then the state agency CalRecycle, which is the state agency on waste management, created the rulemaking. And then they passed that on to every city and every county in the state with the same exact requirements. Due to us being all small cities and small agencies, everybody in the county has teamed up to address this together in nearly the exact same way. So what that means is City of Eureka, City of Arcata, City of Fortuna, City of Rio Dell, we've got Blue Lake, Ferndale, and Trinidad, and the County of Humboldt. I think that was all 8. So we are all doing this together with the amazing support of Humboldt Waste Management Authority. So all the organics processing and curbside programs that we're trying to implement is being done in a cohesive way. So I could pass it to Eric to talk about HWMA's role in that. And I will emphasize that no curbside programs have changed yet. We're in the planning process. We would let you know if and when your curbside service has changed. So green waste bins are still for green waste right now.
Yeah, so HWMA's role in this is going to be, again, the pre-processing of the material. So residents and commercial businesses are going to have it collected. It's going to come to HWMA. We are going to sort out materials that it shouldn't be. We are going to pre-process it, and then we are going to send it or transfer it to an end-use facility.
What would an end-use facility then do with it?
So an end-use facility could be a multitude of things. Generally, it could be a composter, so they make compost, and at the end you get compost and amendments. Anaerobic digestion is another option, and that could be used to generate power, or just in-vessel compost, which is the same thing, although they make a little bit nicer or more streamlined amendments, stuff like that.
So there's no plan to build, say, a compost facility in Humboldt County?
So there's not a concrete plan in place. Obviously, we know we need that in this county. We lack the current infrastructure to have that happen. So for a short time, this material will be sent out of county. But I know Humboldt Waste Management and all of the jurisdictions of Humboldt County don't want to continue to exacerbate sending our material out. We already know the costs associated with that with our landfilling and the solid waste. We don't want to continue that trend with organics. So we do want to have infrastructure built in county, but that's going to take time and funding that currently we don't have.
For businesses out there, what does this mean? What does SB 1383 look like for them? What will they have to now do?
The biggest thing that the whole community will see, businesses and residences, is the mandatory curbside service with 3 bins. So trash, recycle, compost. A lot of communities currently have the trash recycle. Some communities have the green waste bin like Eureka, which is voluntary. But once the organics program is up and running, most jurisdictions will have a mandatory 3 bin system. Some of our smaller cities got 5-year waivers because they're so small. I won't go into details about that. And then the other piece is the mandatory donation of edible food by certain business types. There's what's called Tier 1 and Tier 2 grocery stores, certain size restaurants. They will need to begin to donate food to food banks that is still edible, and we will have to regulate that. There's a lot of other smaller things that aren't as exciting, like how we contract with our haulers and the education metrics we need to meet as government to educate the community. But the 3rd bin and the donating food are the big ones that people will have to make some changes for the better, of course.
How can, oh, sorry, Krista, you're about to say something.
Yeah, I'm just curious about as from a I'll put my resident of Eureka hat on. I do my own composting. And we rarely put out even our trash bin every week. So I'm wondering, looking through the ordinance, I saw some mention about community composting, and it didn't seem that there was a waiver for people like me who already are preventing that waste from entering the waste stream. I'm just wondering if there are any plans to do something like that, or am I going to have to present my case to the city manager? I think a lot of people have that question, especially in my neighborhood. I know a lot of my neighbors also do their own composting.
So the city of Eureka currently has a curbside exemption program. If you generate little to no waste, you cannot have curbside service, self-haul your material, handle it in other ways. And that program will continue. So Krista, you as well as any other residents, if you don't have a lot of trash, don't have a lot of compost, you can apply for that exemption. The only caveat is you have all 3 cans or you have no cans through the exemption. There won't be any in between. But it sounds like you're a perfect fit for the exemption program because you said you barely put out your trash can.
So I would have to be exempted from all 3 cans and be a self-hauler.
Yes. / home composter.
I mean, it kind of seems fair to have the option. I guess maybe your neighbor needs to compost more, and there you go, you have a can. And you don't have to put the can out, it sounds like. You just have to own it and possess it, and then have more of your space full of little trash receptacles.
Another thing, and maybe Krista might be able to speak to this, is the composting of meat, bones, and dairy. Do you handle those on site?
Yeah.
Okay. We do understand that there can be some concerns with those materials in a home composting pile. I don't know what your experience or knowledge is with that.
Yeah, so we rarely put those items in the compost. Every once in a while we do. Chickens are really, they're disturbingly weird. They do eat meat. So if there are meat scraps, often we will give some to our chickens. Bones, however, and fat and oil have to go into the landfill bin.
Yeah. So I think that can be the concern with conversations about how to carve out space for home composting is SB 1383 does say that if you were to put a bone in the trash can, that would be a violation of the mandate. I know that's so nitpicky, but it's the truth. So we need to find
in the trash can or in the food waste can? In
the trash can. So if there was a world in which you had a curbside trash can, but no curbside compost, and your home compost operation couldn't handle that bone and you put it in your trash can, that would be considered contamination because that's an item that can be composted through a commercial program. So these one size fit all programs we're having to figure out, it's hard. We want to carve out a place for every situation and every process, and every household is different. And those are the little nitpicky things we have to get into and talk about how is this going to function. So I'm glad you brought that up because it's something we have spoke about.
Well, and I wonder how to even regulate that. Like, how are you going to go into a store and say, oh, I noticed, I dug through your trash and noticed you threw away things that could have been edible, that one of those packs of muffins would have been perfectly acceptable for tomorrow's breakfast down at St. Vinny's, like, how are you going to actually, like how do you figure this out? And I have trouble again with, neighbors even, or, somebody moves in from out of town and we all share a trash thing, or my family comes to visit and they think I'm a jerk because I'm like, so here's how to organize the trash. You got to clean this. That's not recyclable. This is recyclable. You got to take it out of the plastic bag and throw the plastic bag away. And nobody's following any rules. It's very haphazard, and I just don't see how this can be regulated. What are the plans for that, especially not just businesses, but in residential areas too?
So I'll start with the businesses who are supposed to donate food. The law says that the jurisdictions need to provide an on-site inspection once a year. What that means is we ensure that they have a contract with a food bank. They report the number of pounds they've donated in that year. And then within that inspection, you can also just check their operations and understand their food donation protocol. But of course, you're right, we're not going to know every detail. And that one site visit might not fully inform us, but that will be our due diligence to ensure compliance. And from there, we just hope that people will understand the value of food insecurity in the county and how they can be a part of helping solve that while reducing waste. When it comes to the residential programs, there will be contamination monitoring, which means that franchise haulers in their contracts need to have details of how they monitor for contamination. Typically, a certain percentage of a route per year should have lid flips, where you check to see what's in the bin. So you do an annual lid flip, you see a hose in the recycling bin, you take a picture, you leave a card that lets them know that can't go in there, and we log that. And we will be reporting that education and those actions to the state. So will we know all of the violations happening every day? No, but we'll be educating about the value of these programs and how we can do better and the importance. So it won't be perfect, but it'll be a lot more than has been previously done with curbside programs due to this mandate.
Will businesses get tax breaks, or what is the incentive other than they're going to be breaking the law if they don't do this? Other than the feel-good feeling of knowing that you're not wasting food and feeding people that need it.
I'm sorry, I didn't quite understand the question.
Well, is there an incentive for them to do this other than that if they comply, they're not breaking the law and they have a feel-good feeling like, yay, we're feeding people who are hungry and we're not wasting food, but is there any financial benefits for, say, a grocery store to do this?
You know, that might be a good question for Krista, because reducing waste in the first place has a lot of benefits, and that's always the first and foremost goal. So Krista, do you have anything to add?
No, I think I hear what you're saying, that financial incentive, sure, for businesses having to change, all of it, is kind of where you were going with that. I mean, the feel-good incentive, I wish that went farther. No, I don't have anything to add to that other than, that's kind of where I was going with my question about, my own composting, because I take care of it. Now I feel like I have to pay for, I have to kind of subsidize everyone else's waste, even though I'm doing the right thing, and I don't know how businesses feel. I'm not a business owner, but it would be great if somebody called in who is a business owner and knows that this is coming down. I would love to hear.
I would also have everyone recognize that while we don't have a current infrastructure or organics ecosystem in Humboldt County, that is the end goal. And a reminder that every piece of trash that you throw in your landfill container that comes to HWMA, that truck makes a 400-mile round trip for disposal. So while in the infancy,
that's 8 trucks a day, right, Eric? That I heard.
We average 365 days a year. So obviously a reduction in sending those trucks 400 miles round trip is going to be great. In the infancy, you're not going to see a reduction in your rates, most likely, because we need to build this infrastructure. But eventually the end goal should hopefully be a total reduction in your costs, which result in less trucks being sent out of county, which results in less fossil fuels being burned, which results in a better ecosystem of organics in Humboldt County. That means that there's a potential for you to go to a facility that either gives you amendments because you're part of a member agency of HWMA, or we use this material to generate in-county power. There is a ton of potential for in-county ecosystems to help offset some of these infancy costs of this program. While that's not readily available or readily identifiable right now, that is the end goal of this legislature and obviously of the jurisdictions working towards this.
Right, well, and sorry, Talvi.
Okay, that's okay, go ahead.
I was going to ask on that. I've had a lot of people reaching out to me personally with, you know, getting excited about setting up a site for you know, in county composting facility. And, you know, I have the conversation with them about like permitting, and I don't know very much about that, but how open are our laws locally and statewide to facilitate some of our local folks who have the means to set up something like that? They have land, they want to do this project, you know, how can we help them?
Yeah, so it's runs the gambit, unfortunately. So there is, if you're a small composter that's going to be doing, like the local worm guy is a perfect example right now. He is under a certain permitting threshold, and generally his permit is fairly easy to not only get but follow. If you go all the way up to a large anaerobic digestion facility, the permitting process on that is going to be very, very different. The best thing you can do is to contact your local environmental health. So ours is the local LEA run by the Humboldt County. Contact them and they'll have a ton of information on what you can do and the potential for permitting.
Okay, we're going to be right back. You're listening to Thursday Night Talk on KZZH. Welcome back to Thursday Night Talk on KZZH. I'm your local host, Talvi Fried. I'm here with a few other locals, and we are talking trash. I've got Krista Miller, Eric Keller-Heckman, and Robin Praszker. We just left off with a discussion of, which was, I'm glad you asked the last question you did, Krista, because that was kind of what I'm curious, what does it take to create a facility within Humboldt County, and what would it look like? Can we create a landfill here and we can do the composting, like you had mentioned, or Eric had mentioned the local worm guy, which that's one way to do it. And then the anaerobic method, which I'm not quite sure. It's been a long time since I've taken a chemistry course. What is the anaerobic processing for compost or anaerobic composting?
Yeah, basically the layman's way is it goes into a big pile, and you want to make sure that you have a very specific heat, oxygen, methane production in this compost that makes it break down in a very rapid succession. So instead of having anaerobic static piles or aerobic static piles, which is kind of what you see at West Green right now, if you went out there, the big piles of compost. This is inside a container, for lack of a better term, and it really supercharges the compost process to make sure that it happens in a very quick succession. So West Green, you could say it's 90 days for an aerobic static pile to go from shredded material that comes on site and is put in a pile. Anaerobic digesters can be a couple of days, depending on that, up to 10 days. So it's a rapid composting of that material. Yeah.
And that requires a lot more permits than what the local worm guy has. Yeah. What would it take? Because I feel like Humboldt County is land rich, even though I know it's a lot of private land. Though I know like the city of Eureka is buying plots more for housing right now, though if that's ever fixed and we end up with all this money that we can then spend on, say, a landfill and all of this, what does that look like for Humboldt County? So, like, is it possible? How quickly is that possible? How much would it take?
In 2011, HWMA did a pilot project study in concert with the city of Eureka and city of Arcata that looked at not only the collection, but building an anaerobic digester down off right next to Hillficker Pipe. In 2011, the engineers' estimates were around $12 million, and that's not including the property. So obviously with inflation and the time that's passed, that's going to be quite a bit more. I would say 15 to $20 million just for the facility, not including property. Permitting could run the gambit from 3 years to 10 years, depending on where you want to put it, coastal commissions, EIRs, environmental impact reports, things like that. So it's that type of facility is not an easy facility or an easy process to get. It's not going to happen overnight. It takes a lot of planning. It's going to take a lot of effort and a lot of commitment from whoever's involved, whether that be a private party or public entities.
I want to get into what methods can be done right now. And I kind of like to ask each of you that, just what methods can be done right now for people to reduce, reuse, recycle, and all that jolly good California message that we try to send everywhere. And I'm actually surprised after reading everything I did how California is still lacking. Humboldt County is still lacking. We're kind of this epicenter of environmentalism and eco-friendliness. And it was surprising to me just the fact that landfills, like, we don't have a landfill. We don't have a method of recycling here specifically. We have sorting, but not. So I kind of just do a roundabout, and I want to ask, let's start with Robin. Just what do you think the city of Eureka, especially since you're more, you know quite a bit about that, like what can be done?
So right now, access to green waste recycling is pretty easy. You can subscribe for the third can for that for weekly pickup. You could bring it to HWMA. As far as food waste goes, residential doesn't usually have a large amount of food waste. There are some smaller operations that you could subscribe to, like the local Warm Guy provides a curbside service currently for curbside compost. Very small scale, not something that could serve the entire city, unfortunately, or else we'd be doing that. And then, for businesses as well, taking a look at where the waste is coming from. Is it the fact that maybe you're not repurposing scraps that could be repurposed? Are you over ordering and letting things go bad before you can use it? Are you over serving your customers portion sizes and they're not finishing it? So reduction is always the first and foremost thought across the board. And then what we're doing is been about 2 years now working every day with our regional group of how to get a program. We're currently in the middle of writing a cow recycle grant to fund the facility at HWMA. So there's things that we can do ourselves today without the curbside program, but what the city and the region is doing is spending a lot of time in this planning process. And like I said, right now going for a $3 million grant for a facility here for the pre-processing.
Okay, Krista.
Yeah, I would say that we can support our local businesses that are offering in bulk services. So Winco has bulk, Co-op has bulk, Eureka Natural Foods has bulk. I think probably Safeway even has bulk now. There are soil producers, like you can go and buy your gardening soil now in bulk. Just think bulk. It's a little bit of a hassle to kind of think about how you're going to carry that stuff back home, how many jars and bags you have to take with you to the grocery store. But it does reduce a ton of waste. And I think, in terms of the after effect with your food waste at home, there are, talk to your neighbors. There are community gardens that have compost piles that might be okay with you bringing your food waste there. Yeah, it's a habitual change. It took us a long time to remember to bring our bags to the grocery store, but you can start just being aware of what you're buying. And really, remember, it's not like our fault, all of this stuff that we're dealing with. it is in our right to ask for our favorite products to be packaged differently. And we can, you know, call your favorite products, you know, company and say, hey, look, you know, I love this, you know, seaweed that I love to buy, but the seaweed comes in like these pre-packaged crazy packages, you know, could you figure that out for me? They have a lot more money and resources to help with those issues than we do. There is a limited amount of things that we can do as consumers, but we can be more aware of how our habits are affecting what we put out on the curb.
Eric?
Yeah, I mean, both of them echoed quite a bit. Also, I would just say that just being mindful of your everyday habits and what you do, whether that's how many non-reusable water bottles you use every day, your coffee cup, your to-go orders that you put in. There's just any small amount of things that you can do to reduce just your general waste footprint is always good. Food waste, like both of the other individuals said, if you have a neighbor that has chickens or you have a neighbor that has pigs, ask them, hey, do you need extra food scraps? Do you want these type of food scraps for your animals? Just any type of daily activities that you do, being mindful of the waste that you generate, and then taking a moment to think about how can I either reduce this or who could I give this to that could make use from it.
You mentioned food containers, which I didn't even get into. It was a thought, though, because Arcata had passed another ordinance or something of that sort that restaurants can only provide reusable containers now, and this is another one of, reuse, which I don't know if I feel comfortable with that concept. Like, you turn it in and they sanitize it. I'm still not sure on that one. But we are going to get into our official last round robin. Thank you everyone for providing, you know, the ways that people can help reduce, reuse, recycle. It's not easy as a human being to be conscious of everything, especially I think awareness is so important. So I appreciate everyone coming and talking on the show. Though the round robin is where everyone goes around and says any final thoughts, any ideas that you want people to leave with, concepts they can take with them, or any knowledge from what you're working with, say within the city or within Zero Waste, that you think people should know. Let's go in the same order. Let's start with Robin.
Sure.
It's round robin.
I know, I love that. You know, in general, I would just say that out of sight, out of mind just doesn't work anymore for how we handle our waste. I think that that's how it's been for a long time, and I've been guilty of that myself. But I think there's just a little bit of personal responsibility balanced with the responsibility of the manufacturers and state and national government. It's so multi-layered, but we have a role in it too. So I think to just recognize that what we do when we are done with a product, or when we think we're done with it, to challenge ourselves a little bit more about the options that we could do with it or what we could have done differently. And then also advocating, speaking out, like Krista said, contacting your local government, state government, manufacturers. I think that the squeaky wheel gets the grease. Is that the saying? So I just encourage people to get involved, use their voice. We'll get farther that way.
Thank you.
I think, was I next?
You're next.
Okay. Well, definitely like what you alluded to with the Arcata ordinances and stuff. If you would like to have more information or get involved with a local group like ours, Zero Waste Humboldt, please check us out, zerowastehumboldt.org. And you can send us an email if anything piques your interest and you want to ask questions or you have some ideas. It's contact@zerowastehumboldt.org. And like last parting words. I called the director at our Dry Creek landfill up in Eagle Point and had a great conversation with him. He's about to retire and he invited me to come up on a tour up there, which actually I'm kind of curious about. I did a little bit of math just looking on their website, and I was like, so we have about 76 more years of landfill capacity, and maybe more, because we could do, all of the, the more recycling, lessening the, we can divert more than we can, have more time for that landfill. But his parting words with me were, we just really need to work on consuming less, and he used the French word, So let's buy less. Let's think about it more. It's so easy for us to just get lazy, and it's so rewarding not to put your can out. I feel so proud not to do that. I don't know. I mean, yeah, let's just buy less stuff. It seems so easy to say, but come and talk to us. We have lots of ideas. We do an article in the Eco News. You can check that out. The cities have lots of information that you can contact them. Eric can, you guys do tours there. Recology, you guys do tours. That was really awesome. Yeah, I mean, let's just do it, right? Just get off your butts and do it. It's going to take all of us.
Eric?
Yeah, so there's always a lot of focus on what the new thing is. Right now, the new thing is 1383. That's the mandate that's pushing everything. Before that, the new thing was CRV. But people in general, especially in our community, it seems that they don't take a vested interest unless it's now a problem. Nobody worries about their trash being picked up because that ecosystem is in place. They put things in their trash. They don't think about it. They wheel it to the cart. They wheel it to the curb, and it goes away. And they don't know what happens to it after that. And they don't need to worry about it because it's not a problem. I think if everyone takes a look at the greater ecosystem, the programs that Zero Waste Humboldt offers, the education that they offer, the programs that HWMA offers, mattresses, carpet, all these different types of things. This community, the waste industry, is striving to try and get these diversion programs up and running, try and get these recycling or composting programs up and running. And at least for HWMA and for me, I value our public's input. I value our residents' input. I would value it a lot more if we took a proactive look at it and not a reactive look. And that's unfortunately what we're trying to do right now, is play catch up and react to things that maybe we should have done a little bit a while ago. So I think as long as people take a look at the whole ecosystem and understand that while 1383 and organics and the food waste may be lacking, but in general, Humboldt County, I know you talked about how you think that we are lacking certain things. And I would argue that if you compare our area to other like rural areas, we are very progressive in the programs that we offer. It's not fair to compare us to, say, San Francisco, LA, Orange County. But if you compare us to certain rural entities or rural areas, the jurisdictions in HWMA and Zero Waste, we are a very progressive area that provides quite a bit of service.
Yeah, and I didn't mean to, I'm not trying to compare. I'm comparing Humboldt with Humboldt County and where we could be. And I think there's always room for improvement. That was all I was saying with that. And I'm a little bummed because I totally forgot about all the classes that are out there. I think there's some clubs at Cal Poly that every now and then will be like, hey, come learn how to compost, come learn how to raise chickens. There's a bee club because everybody loves bees. There's even like a bat housing making class that you can take that pops up every now and then. And I'm sure a lot of the classes were kind of canceled over the pandemic, but a lot of them are coming back. And there is a lot of education out there for those who are willing to work a little bit in order to have really great benefits. So I want to thank everyone, and just to go through our list of who was here today. Krista Biller, thank you, for President of Zero Waste Humboldt. Keller-Heckman, Director of Operations for Humboldt Waste Management Authority, and Robin Praszker, Environmental Project Manager from the City of Eureka and member of the Solid Waste Management Task Force. I really appreciate you all being on the show. That is about all the time that we have today. I'd like to thank all of you again, and all of the listeners as well. I hope you enjoyed the sunshine today. And I'm sure Eric's going to get back to his chickens, which that's my only recommendation for everyone. Get chickens. Apparently that solves so many problems. You get eggs. It does. You can throw food at them. Find a neighbor with a pig, because I wouldn't want to have a pig. They're a lot of work. If you have topics or suggestions for Thursday night talk, email us at kzzh@accesshumboldt.net. And just a reminder, the show replays Friday evenings at 8 p.m. right here on KZZH 96.7. And you can watch a show on Access Humboldt's YouTube channel, as well as our broadcast television channel. Thank you all for joining us.